By the time the HOA president installed her steel gate across the only road to my family's cabin, I had already ordered 113 reflective signs that would be installed every 200 feet around the entire shoreline of the Kettle Lake her 60 homes had been marketed on for 11 years. The signs read, in declarative black sans serif lettering, "No HOA boats, private waters, Loonsong Lake." My great-grandfather bought the parcel in 1903. The lake had been in my family for 122 years. I had spent 31 years as a Wisconsin DNR fisheries biologist. The lake was a closed kettle with no inlet or outlet, private waters under Wisconsin Statute Chapter 30, exempt from public trust doctrine. Cordy Branwell didn't know her husband's brokerage had sold 60 homes on lake access he had never owned. Tell me below, would you have cut the gate or posted the lake? The Brevard place sits at the end of a logging road called Brevard Lane in Vilas County, Wisconsin, 23 miles north of the village of Eagle River. 220 acres of mature mixed northern hardwood and conifer, white pine, red pine, sugar maple, yellow birch, balsam fir, running from the cabin clearing down to the south shore of Loonsong Lake. The lake itself is a 47-acre kettle lake, glacial origin, 4.3 miles of shoreline, no inlet stream, no outlet stream, fed entirely by groundwater and seasonal snowmelt. Maximum depth at the northeast hole is 61 feet, native walleye and muskellunge, a pair of common loons that have nested on the western shore every summer since at least 1996. My great-grandfather Erland Brevard bought the parcel in 1903 for $140 from a retiring logger named Halvor Setherstad. Erland was a Norwegian immigrant timber buyer who had come to Vilas County in 1898 looking for the kind of mature white pine the Lake Superior mills had already cut through. He cut very little timber from this parcel. He built a hunting shack on the south shore in 1908 and used it for 30 years before he died. My grandfather Sven Brevard built the current cabin on the same footprint in 1937. He poured a fieldstone foundation, framed the walls with sawmill lumber from the Land O'Lakes Lumber Company, and roofed it with cedar shake. The cabin is still standing. The cedar shakes have been replaced twice. I'm Hamish Brevard. I'm 65. I worked 31 years for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Bureau of Fisheries Management. Most of my career was at the DNR Office of Inland Lakes in Spooner. My specialty was walleye and muskellunge management in private kettle lakes across northern Wisconsin. I helped draft the Wisconsin DNR's Private Waters Classification Guidance in 2003, which is the document the state of Wisconsin uses to determine which inland lakes are subject to public trust navigability and which are not. I retired from the DNR in 2022. My wife, Pernilla, is 62. She spent 22 years as a Wisconsin DNR forest entomologist, tracking emerald ash borer across the state. She retired in 2024. We have 2 daughters. Our older daughter, Annika, is 40 and works as a marine biologist for the Maine Department of Marine Resources. She visits us at the cabin twice a year, once for the 4th of July walleye opener, and once for Christmas. Our younger daughter Sigrid is 37. She works remotely as a hydroacoustic technician for the United States Geological Survey. She moved back into our boathouse loft in 2023 after a divorce, and she has been with us ever since. She runs her USGS work from a setup in the boathouse that includes 3 monitors, 2 USGS-issued multi-beam sonar units, and the kind of professional setup that does not look out of place beside my grandfather's 1937 fly tying bench. In the spring of 2014, a development company called Northwoods Sanctuary Properties broke ground on a 60-home luxury subdivision on the quarter section directly north of our property. They paved over what had been the back 40 of the old Halvor Setherstad farm. They called the development Northwoods Sanctuary at Loonsong. The marketing materials described the development as offering exclusive Loonsong Lake access for member households. That was, technically, a lie. The lake was mine. The marketing has continued for 11 years. In 2018, a 53-year-old woman named Cordelia "Cordy" Branwell took over the Northwoods Sanctuary HOA presidency. Her husband Linnaeus Branwell owned Northwoods Discovery Realty, the brokerage that had sold every lot in the development since 2014. Cordy introduced herself to me in the summer of 2018 by way of a polite letter suggesting we formalize the community's lake access arrangements. That was the last polite letter I received from Cordy Branwell. Cordy Branwell's first letter, in August of 2018, requested that I formalize the lake access arrangement by granting Northwoods Sanctuary at Loonsong a recorded easement over the entire 47-acre lake surface. The proposed easement would have given Northwoods Sanctuary residents perpetual rights of motorboat ingress, kayak launch, swimming, ice fishing, and dock construction on Loonsong Lake. I wrote her a polite letter back declining the request. I explained that Loonsong Lake had been classified as private waters under Wisconsin DNR Private Waters Classification Guidance since 2004. I explained that the lake was on my private property, that the lake bed and water column were not subject to public trust navigability, and that I had been allowing informal recreational use by Northwoods Sanctuary residents as a courtesy rather than as a right. I explained that the courtesy could continue indefinitely, as long as the courtesy was respected as a courtesy. I sent the letter on August 14th of 2018. Cordy did not respond. In November of 2018, the Northwoods Sanctuary HOA newsletter ran a 4-paragraph editorial titled, "A Note on Community Lake Access." The editorial described, without naming me, a longtime adjacent landowner whose continued refusal to recognize the lake access nature of our community has created uncertainty about the long-term marketability of our member households. It urged residents to support board efforts to clarify shared waterway rights. The editorial was followed by a half-page advertisement for Northwoods Discovery Realty, featuring photographs of 3 Northwoods Sanctuary listings, each described as having Loonsong Lake access in the property description. I read the editorial and the advertisement on a Saturday morning at the kitchen table with Pernilla. She set down her coffee. She said, "Hamish, that's an advertisement for a lie." I told her I knew. I drove into Eagle River that afternoon. I visited the Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services Real Estate Division's Regional Contact Office. I requested copies of every Northwoods Discovery Realty MLS listing for Northwoods Sanctuary properties since 2014. I drove home with a banker's box. 47 Northwoods Sanctuary properties had been listed and sold through Linnaeus Branwell's brokerage between 2014 and 2018. 43 of the listings had described the property as having Loonsong Lake access, exclusive lake access, shared waterfront amenities, or lake access community. None of the 43 listings had disclosed that Loonsong Lake was private property of an adjacent landowner, that the access was at the discretion of that landowner, that no easement existed, and that the landowner could terminate the courtesy at any time. That was material disclosure fraud under Wisconsin Statute 452.133. I did not yet tell anyone. I put the banker's box in the closet of my home office at the back of the cabin. In 2019, Cordy filed her first formal HOA complaint with the Vilas County Building Inspector's Office. The complaint alleged that my cabin's septic system was non-compliant with modern lakeside standards and posing a risk to community waters. The Vilas County Building Inspector, a man named Olvar Tikkanen, who had inspected the Brevard cabin's septic on its installation in 1996 and had re-inspected it every 5 years thereafter, drove out the following Tuesday. He looked at the septic. He looked at me. He looked at Cordy's complaint letter. He laughed for 9 seconds. He told me he would issue a no violation observed finding by close of business Friday. He did. In 2020, Linnaeus Branwell himself drove up to my cabin in a 2019 Ford F450 with the Northwoods Discovery Realty logo on the door. He parked in my driveway at 3 in the afternoon on a Thursday in early September. He got out of the truck. He was 60 years old, salt and pepper hair, country club tan, polo shirt over chinos. He said, "Mr. Brevard, I'd like to make you an offer." I did not invite him onto the porch. He said, "We can buy out your entire 220-acre parcel for $1.3 million. Today, in writing. The cabin stays, you live out your days, and the lake becomes part of the Northwoods Sanctuary Community Asset Portfolio when you and Mrs. Brevard are gone." I looked at him. I said, "Mr. Branwell, my great-grandfather paid $140 for this parcel in 1903. He paid in part because the man who sold it to him said the lake was the most beautiful kettle in northern Wisconsin. I am not interested. Please leave." He smiled. He drove away. He came back in February of 2021 with an offer for $1.6 million. In June of 2021 with an offer for $2.1 million. I declined every time. In April of 2022, the Northwoods Sanctuary HOA voted at their spring board meeting to authorize the construction of a community pier complex on the northern shore of Loonsong Lake. The northern shore was on my property. The board voted on the construction at a meeting I was not invited to. The minutes of the meeting, which were posted to the HOA's closed Facebook group on April 22nd, included a budget line item of $158,000 for community pier and lake access improvements at the northern frontage. Cordy Branwell mailed me a copy of the minutes on April 24th with a cover letter formally requesting my cooperation with the construction. I declined. In May, Cordy filed a small claims case against me in Vilas County District Court. The case sought $1,000 in damages for interference with planned community amenity development. The case was assigned to Honorable Winona Lillehammer, who had served on the Vilas County bench for 29 years and who had grown up 2 lakes north of mine. She dismissed the case from the bench at 3:45 Tuesday afternoon. She added a brief order admonishing Cordy Branwell for filing a damages action over a planned community amenity that has no legal basis on the defendant's recorded property. She awarded me $420 in court costs. Cordy did not appeal. What she did instead, 3 weeks later, was contract a residential dock builder out of Minocqua to begin pier construction on the northern shore of Loonsong Lake. The crew arrived on a Tuesday morning in early June with a pile driver mounted on a pontoon barge, 2 flatbed trucks of pressure-treated cedar, and 42 galvanized pier brackets. I was in the boathouse with Sigrid that morning. She was running a USGS sonar calibration. I heard the pile driver start up on the north shore. I drove the pickup around the lake on the perimeter logging road and arrived on the north shore at 9:47 a.m. The crew chief was a 63-year-old man named Wendell Sacco, who had been building docks on northern Wisconsin lakes for 42 years. He looked at me. He looked at his crew. He looked at the pile driver, which had just begun to seat its first pile in 3 feet of water. I said, "Mr. Sacco, are you working under a Wisconsin DNR Chapter 30 Navigable Waters Construction Permit or under a private waters owner authorization?" He blinked. He set down his clipboard. He said, "Mrs. Branwell told me the lake was community-owned." I gave him the survey monument coordinates for the Brevard parcel boundary, which ran along the entire northern shore. I gave him the Wisconsin DNR Private Waters Classification number for Loonsong Lake. I asked him to call the DNR Office of Inland Lakes in Spooner if he wanted to confirm. He called Spooner from his cell phone right there on the shore. The DNR confirmed within 4 minutes. Wendell Sacco's crew packed up the pile driver. They drove away. They left a single half-driven pile in 3 feet of water, which I removed myself with a come-along winch the following Saturday. Wendell Sacco called me that evening at home. He said, "Mr. Brevard, I want you to know I did not know. Mrs. Branwell told my office the HOA had full authorization. I would have asked for documentation if I had known better." I told him I understood. He told me he would never accept a contract from the Northwoods Sanctuary HOA again. That weekend, Sigrid sat down at the kitchen table with me and the banker's box. She had been thinking about the disclosure fraud pattern since I had first shown her the MLS listings the previous Christmas. She had been quietly building a spreadsheet of every Northwoods Sanctuary sale and resale since 2014 in her spare time. She turned her laptop screen toward me. She said, "Dad, 63 Northwoods Sanctuary properties have been sold or resold through Linnaeus's brokerage since 2014. 58 of them included some variation of Loonsong Lake access in the MLS listing description. The average sale price was 31% above comparable Vilas County lakefront adjacent properties without lake access. The total dollar value of the disclosed access premium across all 63 sales is approximately $7.2 million. I sat back at the table. She said one more thing. "Dad, he has been selling lake access he doesn't own for 11 years. The fraud is not Northwoods Sanctuary. The fraud is Linnaeus Branwell's brokerage." In the spring of 2023, Cordy Branwell launched the most coordinated public pressure campaign she had attempted yet. She started in the HOA newsletter with a 3-issue series titled Modernizing Loonsong, A Path Forward for Community Lake Stewardship. The series argued, without naming me, that outdated landowner attitudes were holding back the community's rightful enjoyment of the lake we have all invested in. She followed the newsletter series with a letter to the editor in the Vilas County News Review describing me, again without naming me, as a single landowner whose stubborn refusal to share regional resources has cast a shadow over the future value of one of the most desirable subdivision communities in the North Woods. She organized the North Woods Sanctuary HOA Community Awareness Rally on the county road outside our property in May. 23 residents in matching forest green North Woods Sanctuary windbreakers walked the easement for 41 minutes with hand-painted signs. Most of the residents had no idea Cordy had been telling them they owned the lake when they did not. Pernilla watched the rally from the front porch with a cup of coffee. She did not say anything. She walked to the wood stove. She added a stick of yellow birch. She walked back to the porch. She said, "Hamish, those people have been lied to." I told her I knew. Sigrid spent the next 2 months doing what Sigrid had been waiting for permission to do. She contacted the Wisconsin Department of Justice Real Estate Fraud Unit in Madison on Monday, June 5, 2023. She gave them the spreadsheet she had built. She gave them the MLS listing copies from the banker's box. She gave them screenshots of Linnaeus Branwell's Northwoods Discovery Realty marketing materials going back to 2014. The investigator assigned to the case was a senior deputy attorney general named Sigrun Haug. Sigrun was 46. She had grown up on a dairy farm outside Fond du Lac. She had been working real estate fraud at the Wisconsin DOJ for 14 years. She had been waiting for a Vilas County lake access disclosure case to land on her desk for at least 6 of those years. She called Sigrid back on Wednesday morning at 7:15. She said, "Ms. Brevard, I need every document your father has. I need every photograph of every dock, every shoreline post, and every HOA newsletter. I need every property sale record. I need it on my desk by Friday." Sigrid had it on Sigrun's desk by Thursday afternoon. Sigrun called me Friday at 4 p.m. She said, "Mr. Brevard, I am pulling Linnaeus Branwell's MLS sales history across the entire state of Wisconsin, going back to 2009. If he has been running this scheme on Loonsong, I want to know if he has been running it elsewhere." She called me back Monday morning. She had found it. Linnaeus Branwell had been the listing broker on lake access disclosure fraud at 3 other northern Wisconsin developments, going back to 2009. A subdivision on Star Lake in Vilas County, a subdivision on Boulder Lake in Oneida County, and a subdivision on Big St. Germain Lake in Vilas County. All 3 subdivisions had been marketed as offering exclusive lake access to a kettle lake that was actually private waters owned by an adjacent landowner. In all 3 cases, the adjacent landowner had been an elderly Wisconsin landowner who had eventually sold their parcel under quiet pressure to the development company. In all 3 cases, the development company had then claimed actual ownership of the lake and marketed the subdivision accordingly. The pattern had been running for 15 years. The dollar value of disclosed access premium across all 4 schemes combined was approximately $23.4 million. Sigrun said, "Mr. Brevard, this is the largest real estate disclosure fraud case in northern Wisconsin in 25 years. I am going to need the Wisconsin DOJ to coordinate with the Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services and the federal U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Wisconsin. This is going to be a multi-agency case." I told her yes. That afternoon, I sat on the porch with Pernilla and Sigrid. I looked out at Loonsong Lake. The loon pair was on the western shore, where they had nested every summer since at least 1996. The walleye were feeding in the northeast hole. The afternoon light was the color of old amber. I said, "Bud, I think it is time for the signs." Sigrid asked me how many. I said, "Enough." I called Sigrun Hauge back at the Wisconsin DOJ on Tuesday morning. I asked her one question. I asked her if she could put me in touch with the 3 families who had sold their lake parcels to Linnaeus Branwell's development companies between 2009 and 2018. She was quiet for a long moment. She said, "Hamish, 2 of the 3 are still alive. One is in assisted living in Wausau. One is in a small house on County Trunk K outside 3 Lakes. The 3rd family, the elderly couple who owned Big St. Germain, both passed in 2021, within 4 months of each other." She gave me the contact information for the 2 surviving families. I drove to Wausau on Thursday morning with Sigrid in the passenger seat. The man I met at Mount View Care Center was named Anders Pollard. He was 87. He had owned the lake parcel on Star Lake from 1967 until 2012. He had sold the parcel to a Linnaeus Branwell affiliate company called Star Lake Sanctuary, LLC, for what he had been told was the only offer he would ever receive. He had been a widower at the time. His only daughter lived in Australia. His health had been failing. Anders Pollard sat in his wheelchair in a sunroom overlooking a small pond. He listened to me for an hour and a half. When I finished, he said one sentence. "Mr. Brevard, I have been waiting 13 years for someone to ask me about Linnaeus Branwell." He signed a sworn affidavit on the spot. The second family I visited was outside Three Lakes that afternoon. A woman named Gerda Korhonen, age 79, had owned the Boulder Lake parcel from 1981 until 2014. She had been pressured to sell after a coordinated multi-year HOA campaign across the road from her cabin. She still had every letter the HOA had sent her between 2009 and 2014 in a green metal file box in her root cellar. She gave me the file box. She signed a sworn affidavit on her kitchen table. She told me Sigrid had reminded her, when she walked up to the porch, of her own daughter who had died of leukemia in 2003. I drove home that evening with Sigrid in the passenger seat and a green metal file box in the truck bed. The Wisconsin DOJ now had 2 living victims, 2 recorded oral histories, 2 signed affidavits, 15 years of MLS records, 63 Northwoods sanctuary sales, and a pattern across 4 northern Wisconsin lakes. What it did not yet have was the demonstration. The demonstration was the signs. Wisconsin Statute Chapter 30 gave me the authority to post Loonsong Lake as private waters. The statute required that posting be done in clearly visible signage, at intervals not exceeding 200 feet along the entire shoreline, with specific statutory language indicating the lake's private waters classification and the consequences of unauthorized use. The shoreline was 4.3 miles long. That was 113 signs. Sigrid measured the perimeter using her USGS GPS unit on Saturday morning. She marked every 200 feet on a digital map. She emailed the map to a sign manufacturer in Wausau that afternoon. The signs arrived by truck on Wednesday morning. White reflective vinyl, 12 inches by 18 inches, black sans serif lettering. No HOA boats. Private waters. Loonsong Lake. Northwoods Sanctuary HOA residents prohibited. Wisconsin Statute Chapter 30. Enforcement in effect. Trespass will be prosecuted. Below the main text, in smaller font, was the lake's DNR Private Waters Classification Number, my contact information as the lake's owner of record, and the Wisconsin DOJ Real Estate Fraud Unit's tip line for any property owner who had been told they owned access to Loonsong Lake. The signs were ready to be posted. I had not yet driven the perimeter to install them. Cordy Branwell did not yet know they existed. But on a Friday morning in early August, 28 days after I had returned from Gerda Korhonen's kitchen table with her green file box, Cordy Branwell installed a 4-foot black powder-coated steel gate across Brevard Lane at the southern edge of the Northwoods Sanctuary common area. She locked it. She did not give me a key. I called my attorney Ezra Tildum the morning the gate went up. Ezra was 68. He had been my attorney for 28 years. He had grown up 2 lakes south of mine. His father had been a Vilas County Circuit Court judge in the 1970s. He drove out to the cabin that afternoon. He read the gate documentation Cordy had taped to the steel post. He read my grandfather, Sven Brevard's 1937 recorded easement that ran across the entire half-section that had become Northwoods Sanctuary at Loonsong. He laughed for 14 seconds. He said, "Hamish, the easement was recorded 28 years before the development was platted. It is senior to every HOA covenant they have ever drafted. The gate is illegal. I can have it removed by court order in 11 days. I told him not to bother with the gate yet. I told him about the signs. He thought about it for a long minute. He said, "Hamish, if you post the lake under Chapter 30, you are exercising a statutory right. The HOA cannot retaliate. Whatever they have been doing on your easement becomes secondary. The signs are the main story." He helped me draft the certified mail notification to all 60 Northwoods Sanctuary households. The notification informed each resident that Loonsong Lake had been formally posted as private waters under Wisconsin Statute Chapter 30, that all Northwoods Sanctuary HOA-affiliated watercraft were prohibited from launching on or operating on the lake, and that unauthorized use would be prosecuted as trespass. Each notification included a copy of the Wisconsin DNR private waters classification record for the lake, a copy of my recorded property survey showing the lake entirely within my parcel boundary, and a copy of the Wisconsin Statute Chapter 30, posting requirements I was complying with. The notifications also included one additional document Ezra had drafted himself. It was a one-page summary of what the Wisconsin DOJ Real Estate Fraud Unit had been investigating since June. It listed the 4 affected northern Wisconsin lakes. It listed the 15-year time span. It listed the $23.4 million in alleged disclosure fraud. It listed Linnaeus Branwell's brokerage by name. The summary ended with one sentence. If you purchased your Northwood Sanctuary home on the basis of represented Loonsong Lake access, you may have been a victim of material disclosure fraud. The notifications were mailed at the Eagle River Post Office on Monday morning. That same Monday afternoon, Wendell Salco, the dock builder who had refused to install the unauthorized pier in 2022, drove out to the cabin in his 1998 Ford F350 with a thermos of black coffee and a flatbed full of cedar posts. He had heard from a sympathetic contractor friend in Eagle River that I was about to post the lake. He said, "Mr. Brevard, I have 30 years of cedar post stock at my yard outside Minocqua. I would like to install the signposts for you at cost." I told him I would pay him full price. He told me he would not accept it. We compromised on materials cost plus lunch. Wendell and a 2-person crew started installing posts on Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. They worked west to east along the shoreline. They drove cedar posts 5 feet into the ground at exact 200-foot intervals using a hand auger and a hydraulic post driver. By Wednesday afternoon at 4, all 113 posts were in. Sigrid coordinated the sign installation Thursday morning. She brought the signs out of the boathouse on a 4-wheeler with a small trailer. She and her mother and I mounted the signs on the posts with cedar shake screws Wendell had supplied. We finished the perimeter installation at 6:15 Thursday evening. The shoreline of Loonsong Lake was now posted, in compliance with Wisconsin Statute Chapter 30, at exactly the legal interval required by state law. The signs read, in their declarative summary line, "No HOA boats. Private waters, Loonsong Lake." The certified mail notifications were delivered to Northwood Sanctuary households Wednesday and Thursday. By Thursday at 4 p.m., Cordy Branwell had received hers. By Friday at noon, 11 Northwood Sanctuary residents had called the Wisconsin DOJ Real Estate Fraud Unit tip line on the bottom of the notification. By Friday at 3 p.m., Sigrun Hauge called me. She said, "Hamish, the case has tripled in size in 24 hours. We are going to bring federal charges by the end of August." I told her I had one more thing in mind. She said, "Tell me." I told her about the August County Board meeting, where Linnaeus Branwell was scheduled to present a rezoning request for a Phase 2 expansion of Northwood Sanctuary. I told her it might be a useful place to file the indictment. She said, "Hamish, I will be there with a court reporter and 3 Wisconsin DOJ investigators. We will see you Tuesday the 24th at 7 p.m. In the 7 days between the certified mail delivery and the August County Board meeting, Cordy Branwell made 4 serious mistakes. The first arrived on Friday afternoon, when Northwood Sanctuary Properties LLC filed an emergency civil action in Vilas County Circuit Court, seeking a temporary restraining order against the signs. The complaint alleged that I had engaged in coordinated harassment of community members in violation of established lake access norms. Judge Winona Lillehammer denied the TRO from her chambers at 5:45 Friday afternoon. She added a brief order noting that private waters classification under Wisconsin Statute Chapter 30 is a statutory right that no civil action may stay. She awarded Ezra Tildum $19,000 in sanctions. The second mistake came on Saturday morning, when Cordy Branwell drove to the Wisconsin DNR regional headquarters in Woodruff and requested an emergency reclassification of Loonsong Lake from private waters to public navigable waters under Wisconsin Statute Chapter 30. The DNR regional director, a woman named Tove Anderson, who had worked beside me at the DNR Office of Inland Lakes for 11 years before transferring to Woodruff in 2015, listened to Cordy's request for 9 minutes. She said one sentence, "Mrs. Branwell, the lake has no navigable inlet or outlet. The classification will not change. Please leave the office." Cordy left. She drove to the Vilas County News Review office that afternoon and gave an emergency interview to a reporter she had previously cultivated. The interview ran on Sunday morning's front page under the headline, HOA President Calls for Wisconsin Reform of Private Lake Rules. The reporter, a 31-year-old man named Heath Tunberg, did not fact-check the interview. The interview included Cordy's statement that the Loonsong situation has demonstrated the need for legislative reform of Wisconsin's outdated private waters doctrine. A retired DNR fisheries supervisor named Ing Bjelland, who lived in Eagle River and had read every issue of the News Review since 1979, wrote a letter to the editor Sunday afternoon explaining that Wisconsin's private waters doctrine had been settled law since the Wisconsin Supreme Court's 1894 decision in Diedrich versus Northwestern Union Railway, and that Cordy's reform statement was therefore either uninformed or deliberately misleading. The letter ran on Monday morning's front page. The third mistake came on Monday afternoon, when Linnaeus Branwell himself drove up to the cabin in his Ford F450 and parked at the foot of the driveway. He did not get out at first. He sat in the truck for 43 minutes. Then he got out. He walked to the driveway. He did not come up to the porch. He said, "Brevard, $2.5 million. Cash. Today. Pull the signs." I walked down the gravel with Pernilla beside me. I said, "Mr. Branwell, the signs are statutory compliance under Wisconsin Statute Chapter 30. They are not negotiable. The Wisconsin DOJ Real Estate Fraud Unit has been investigating you for 14 weeks. The federal U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Wisconsin has been coordinating with them for 9. You are not negotiating with me. You are watching." His face went the color of wet cement. He walked back to his Ford F450. He drove away. He did not come back. The fourth mistake came on Monday evening at 9:15, when Cordy Branwell, having had everything stripped from her over the previous 5 days, drove her Lincoln Navigator up the Brevard Lane logging road and parked at the foot of the cabin driveway. She did not get out. She sat in the driver's seat for 31 minutes. Then she got out. She walked to the lake's south shore. She stood at the dock my grandfather had built in 1937. She did not touch anything. Sigrid watched her from the boathouse loft window. Pernilla watched her from the kitchen window. I walked down to the dock in my work boots. I stopped 20 feet from her. I said one sentence. "Mrs. Branwell, get off my property. The county board meeting is tomorrow night." She looked at me. She did not say anything. She walked back to her Navigator. She drove away. I walked back up the gravel. Pernilla was on the porch with a thermos of fresh coffee. She said, "Hamish, tomorrow." I said, "Tomorrow, Pernilla." We sat on the porch until the moon cleared the white pine ridge across the lake. The loons called from the western shore. I told my grandfather Sven thank you. The Vilas County Board meeting was held at the Vilas County Government Center in Eagle River at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, August 24th. The room was full. I had not expected the room to be full. The Vilas County Board meeting agenda had 3 items. The Phase 2 rezoning request for Northwood Sanctuary at Loonsong was item 3. Items 1 and 2 were procedural. Linnaeus Branwell had been preparing his rezoning presentation for 10 months. By 6:45, when Pernilla and Sigrid and I arrived, the meeting room was at standing capacity, approximately 140 people. 47 of them were Northwood Sanctuary residents. 23 were Vilas County reporters, photographers, and broadcast staff who had been tipped about an active situation by the Vilas County News Review. The remainder were Wisconsin DOJ investigators, federal U.S. Attorney's staff, Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services Real Estate Division investigators, 3 Wisconsin DNR conservation wardens in uniform, and a court reporter, Sigrun Haug, had brought up from Madison. Anders Pollard sat in the second row in his wheelchair. His daughter had flown in from Australia to push him. Gerda Korhonen sat beside him in a wool barn coat she had owned since 1979, with the green metal file box from her root cellar on her lap. Wendell Sauko sat in the third row, in clean work boots. Inge Bjelland, the retired DNR fisheries supervisor who had written the Sunday letter to the editor, sat in the fourth row with a yellow legal pad. Tove Anderson, my old DNR colleague from the Woodruff Regional Office, sat in the back row in her uniform. Linnaeus Branwell sat at the petitioner's table in front of the board. Cordy Branwell sat behind him in the front row. Linnaeus began his presentation at 7:05. He spoke for 19 minutes. He described Phase 2 as the expansion of an established lakefront community with proven property value performance. He showed slides of waterfront properties in the development, with the lake in the background. He described the development's community access amenities and shared waterway features. He did not use the phrase lake access once. He had been told by someone, probably his lawyer, that the phrase was no longer safe. He concluded at 7:24. The board chairman opened the floor to public comment. I stood up first. I walked to the petitioner's microphone. I set down a manila folder. I opened it. I said, "Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Hamish Brevard. I am the owner of record of Loonsong Lake. My family has owned this lake since 1903. My grandfather, Sven Brevard, recorded an ingress-egress easement in 1937 that runs across the entire half-section that has become Northwood Sanctuary at Loonsong. The HOA gated that easement on Friday, August 7th, in violation of recorded property rights that predate their development by 77 years. I held up the easement. I held up the gate documentation. I held up the Wisconsin DNR private waters classification for Loonsong Lake. I said, Loonsong Lake is classified as private waters under Wisconsin Statute Chapter 30. The lake is entirely within my parcel boundary. There is no navigable inlet or outlet. The water is mine. The bed is mine. The right to exclude is mine. I have exercised that right by posting 113 signs around the entire perimeter of the lake in compliance with Chapter 30 posting requirements. I held up one of the signs. It read, "No HOA boats, private waters, Loonsong Lake." I lowered the sign. I said, "For 63 property sales between 2014 and 2025, Mr. Linnaeus Branwell's brokerage marketed Northwood Sanctuary at Loonsong as offering exclusive Loonsong Lake access. That representation was false. The Loonsong Lake access did not exist. The lake was never the HOA's to grant. The buyers of those 63 properties were defrauded of approximately $7.2 million in disclosed access premium." I let the room sit with it. I continued. "The pattern is not new. Mr. Branwell ran the same scheme on Star Lake in 2009 to 2012, on Boulder Lake in 2010 to 2014, on Big St. Germain in 2012 to 2015. Mr. Pollard, in the second row, is one of the original sellers. Mrs. Corhonen beside him is another. The total cross-development disclosure fraud is $23.4 million. I sat down. Sigrun Hoga stood up from the back row. She walked to the front of the room. She held up a folded document. She said, "Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I am Sigrun Hauge, Senior Deputy Attorney General for the Wisconsin Department of Justice Real Estate Fraud Unit. I have a sealed indictment against Linnaeus Branwell, Cordelia Branwell, Northwoods Sanctuary Properties LLC, and Northwoods Discovery Realty LLC. I am unsealing it now." She read the indictment. It included 63 counts of disclosure fraud, 11 counts of conspiracy, 4 counts of HOA breach of fiduciary duty, and 3 counts of unlicensed real estate practice across the relevant time period. Linnaeus Branwell did not move. Cordy Branwell stood up. She tried to speak. The Wisconsin DOJ investigators in the back row stood up first. The handcuffs went on at 7:46. The Vilas County Board Chairman called for order at 7:47. He looked at the room. He looked at Sigrun Hauge. He looked at the Wisconsin DOJ investigators escorting Linnaeus and Cordy Branwell out of the meeting room. He said one sentence. "The Phase 2 rezoning request before this board is hereby withdrawn from consideration, pending resolution of the criminal charges just announced." A Northwood Sanctuary resident in the 7th row stood up. His name was Asher Petrolia. He was 46. He had purchased Lot 12 at Northwood Sanctuary at Loonsong in 2017 for $635,000. He had been told, in writing, that the property included exclusive Loonsong Lake access. He looked at me. He said, "Mr. Brevard, I did not know." I looked at him. I said, "Mr. Petrolia, most of you did not know. The fraud was not committed by the HOA residents. The fraud was committed by the HOA leadership and the developer. The Wisconsin DOJ will be in touch with each affected household about restitution within 30 days. A woman in the 9th row stood up. Her name was Rensky Carlson. She had purchased Lot 41 in 2019. She said, "Mr. Brevard, I am sorry." A man in the back row stood up. Conrad Twominen, Lot 56. He said, "Mr. Brevard, I am sorry too. By 8:05, 12 Northwood Sanctuary residents had stood up to apologize. I told them to save their apologies for the courtroom and to direct any cooperation toward the Wisconsin DOJ. The board adjourned at 8:19. The Wisconsin DOJ held a press conference on the steps of the Vilas County Government Center at 8:45. Sigrun Hauge spoke for 11 minutes. She announced the consolidated indictment. She announced the parallel federal investigation. She announced the Cross Lake disclosure fraud pattern. She thanked Sigrid Brevard by name for the spreadsheet that had broken the case open. A reporter from WJFW Channel 12 in Rhinelander turned the camera on me at 9:02. She said, "Mr. Brevard, the HOA has been calling your lake a community amenity for 11 years. What would you say to Mrs. Branwell tonight?" I thought about it for a long second. I held up my grandfather Sven Brevard's recorded 1937 easement. The document had been written in fountain pen by my grandfather himself. It had been notarized by a Vilas County notary named Magnus Lillehammer, Judge Winona Lillehammer's grandfather, on June 14th of 1937. I held the easement where the camera could see it. I said, "Ma'am, my grandfather recorded this easement in 1937 to make sure my family could reach our cabin for as long as a Brevard owned the land. My family has owned the land since 1903. The lake has been ours since the glacier left it. The HOA you presided over for 7 years was sold to its residents on the basis of an access that was never yours to grant. The signs are not retaliation. The signs are statutory compliance. You should have read Chapter 30 before you marketed my lake." I lowered the easement. The reporter said one more thing. "Mr. Brevard, are you going to take the signs down once the indictment is resolved?" I thought about it for a long moment. I said, "Ma'am, the signs are not coming down. The lake will not be accessed by HOA-affiliated vessels again, in my lifetime or my daughter's lifetime. The Northwood Sanctuary residents may petition the state of Wisconsin to negotiate a future limited educational use of the lake under a Wisconsin DNR Class A Wild Lake Refuge program, which I will be establishing with the DNR by the end of the calendar year. The petition will be considered case by case. The fraud is over." I lowered the microphone. The camera held on the cabin behind me, with Loonsong Lake visible through the gap in the white pines. Linnaeus Branwell pleaded guilty in February to 17 federal counts spanning RICO racketeering, wire fraud, mail fraud, real estate disclosure fraud across 4 Wisconsin lake developments, and conspiracy, 9 years federal at FCI Oxford, plus $11.7 million in restitution, distributed to the affected property owners across 4 developments by court receiver. Cordy Branwell pleaded guilty in April to conspiracy, accessory to real estate fraud, breach of fiduciary duty under color of HOA authority, and 1 count of obstructing a Wisconsin DNR investigation. 2 years state prison at Taycheedah Correctional Institution, 1 year before parole eligibility. She was permanently barred from serving on any HOA board in the state of Wisconsin. Northwoods Discovery Realty LLC was dissolved by court order. Linnaeus Branwell's Wisconsin real estate license was permanently revoked by the Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services. Northwoods Sanctuary Properties LLC was placed in court-supervised receivership. Phase 2 was permanently canceled. The 41 undeveloped acres that had been planned for Phase 2 were deeded into a Vilas County conservation easement managed by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. The Northwood Sanctuary HOA was reconstituted in May under new bylaws. The new board's first chair was Asher Petrolia, the resident from Lot 12 who had stood up at the county board meeting to apologize. The new bylaws capped HOA dues at $38 per month, prohibited any board member from holding a financial interest in any real estate brokerage doing business with the HOA, and explicitly disclaimed any lake access representation in any marketing of community properties. The 60 Northwood Sanctuary households received restitution payments averaging $117,000 per household within 12 months of the Wisconsin DOJ settlement. The funds were sourced from the seized assets of Linnaeus Branwell and the receivership of Northwoods Sanctuary Properties LLC. In October of 2025, I partnered with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources to designate Loonsong Lake as a Wisconsin Class A Wild Lake Refuge, the first such designation in Vilas County in 18 years. The refuge designation prohibits all motorized watercraft, all commercial recreation, and all unauthorized recreational use, while preserving the lake as a long-term native fishery research site and a study area for Kettle Lake ecology. A small educational program operates on the lake under Wisconsin DNR partnership, 3 weekends a year. The program is open to Vilas County public school students and brings a total of approximately 100 children to the lake annually for guided observation, native species identification, and water quality sampling. Pernilla and I established the Sven Brevard Inland Lakes Conservation Initiative in May of 2025. The initiative provides scholarships to Wisconsin students entering DNR fisheries management careers and funds private waters conservation easements across northern Wisconsin. The initiative's first scholarship recipient is a young woman named Marit Solberg from Hurley, whose grandfather owned a Kettle Lake in Iron County that he had to sell to a developer in 2019. Marit started her freshman year at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point in September. She wants to be a Wisconsin DNR fisheries biologist. Sigrid has continued to live in the boathouse loft. She has continued her USGS hydroacoustic technician work remotely. She married a Wisconsin DNR conservation warden named Axel Hegum in July at the South Shore dock my grandfather built in 1937. They have no children yet. Axel moved into the cabin's spare bedroom after the wedding. Annika and her family flew in from Maine for the wedding. The Brevard cabin has not had 4 generations of family on the porch since my grandfather Sven died in 1979. The signs are still up. I drive the perimeter logging road once a month to check them. Some have weathered, none have been removed. Wendell Sauko's cedar posts are holding. Last night, the 4 of us, Pernilla, Sigrid, Axel, and I, drove the F-150 down to a supper club in Eagle River called the Soderberg. We ate roasted chicken and Wisconsin Old Fashions at the bar under a ceiling fan that had been there since 1968. The jukebox played Hank Williams Jr. We drove home with the windows down. The Northwoods summer night was warm. A pair of loons called across Loonsong Lake from the western shore. I'm Hamish Brevard. That was my great-grandfather's lake. That was my grandfather's cabin. That was my daughter's spreadsheet. That was the wall of signs.
Cody Brandwell didn't fall because Hamish Brevard got loud. She fell because Hamish Brevard read Chapter 30 of the Wisconsin Statutes, and her husband did not. For 11 years across one HOA presidency and one family-owned real estate brokerage, the Northwood Sanctuary at Loonsong Development has been marketing 60 homes on exclusive lake access that did not belong to any HOA, any developer, or any resident. Not once in those 11 years did anyone behind the scheme stop to ask the basic question: whose name is actually on the lake? That's the lesson. A scheme survives on the assumption that nobody will read the statute. Real strength is having read the statute. On 43 sections, including the subsections about Kettle Lakes with no inlet or outlet. Hamish didn't beat her with anger. He beat her with statute. He kept the easement. He kept the deed. He let his daughter build the phrases. He let the Wisconsin Department of Justice find the person across 4 other lakes. He let 113 reflective sites do the rest of the work. If you ever have an HOA market your property as their amenity, drop your story in the comments. We hear each other. Hit subscribe. Next week, we have to cost the man when HOA tried to bulldoze a man's family lobster house. Turns out, the lobster man's grandfather wrote the state harbor master regulations.